Ladies and gentlemen, it's my pleasure to announce that smooth sack summer is officially upon us. When you're playing in the summer sun, make sure you're groomed from pubes to bum. Thanks to our friends at Manscaped, you can make this season your smoothest yet. The Performance Package 5.0 Ultra is the ultimate bundle to keep your boys downstairs cool while looking hot. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with our exclusive offer. Get 20% off plus free shipping when you go to manscaped.com and use code THPN summertime, and the trimming is easy. The Manscaped Performance Package 5.0 Ultra has everything you need to prepare that summer bod. Every man knows how scary it can get when going for a close shave below the belt. That's why I trust Manscaped them for all my sensitive areas. Inside this package, you'll find the star of the show, the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. Their 5th generation trimmer features 2 interchangeable, next-gen skin-safe blade heads, a standard one for taking a little off the top, and a new foil blade to go smooth wherever your heart desires. We'd also have dual LED spotlights to provide contrast on multiple skin tones, 3 length setting combs, and oh, did I mention this trimmer is waterproof too. Beach, lake, or shower, this razor will devour even the strongest pubes. Now that you have the perfect haircut, use Manscaped's liquid formulations to keep that freshness even at the hottest summer BBQs. The Crop Soother aftershave lotion and Crop Preserver Anti-Chafe ball deodorant. Once they touch your sack, it will never go back. Manscaped even threw in 2 free gifts to their Performance Package 5.0. The Manscaped Boxers and a Shed Travel Bag. More what products? Say no more. Manscaped's new Buff Bundle is all you need to keep the summer heat a breeze. This bundle includes their signature silicone scrubber plus body wash. Ditch your nasty loofah and grab a taste of freshness. Get 20% off plus free shipping with the code THPN at manscaped.com. That's 20% off plus free shipping with the code THPN at manscaped.com. It's smooth sack summer, boys. Get on board or get left behind.
Episode 79 of the Habs Culture podcast. My name is Justin Schwartz alongside Liam Baum. We are in the middle of June or back end of June. I know we say this every time, but it has been a little while since we've recorded. Took a little bit of time off near the beginning of the summer. There was nothing to talk about from a Montreal Canadiens standpoint, but things are starting to pick up, right? The NHL draft, free agency in July, the Stanley Cup finals are well underway, and Game 5 tonight on June 18th. And let's start off with a little bit of talk about that. We're not going to spend too much time on that because at the end of the day, it's 3-1 Florida. Dominant performances from Bobrovsky, Barkov, Tkachuk, and others. McDavid and Draisaitl have just not been playing to the best of their abilities in this series, to keep it short. Liam, how have you been enjoying these Stanley Cup playoffs and more particularly the Stanley Cup final?
Going into the finals, I thought this was going to be one of the closer finals and definitely thought it would go to 7. I mean, there's still a chance it does. Obviously, at this point, it doesn't look that likely. But as I've been saying to everybody I know, if there's one team that can come back from 3-0, it's got to be the Oilers. They got the best player in the world. And once their top 5 players, McDavid, Draisaitl, Nuge, Hyman, and Bouchard are at their best, really nobody could stop them. And I think it was you gave me the stat that when the Oilers lost 3 in a row, they rebounded with winning like 8, 16, and another crazy long streak. So I don't think it's impossible for the Oilers to come back, and I think it's very possible that they are the team that can, but at this point, I don't know, because Florida is just such a good team, and I got to see them live against the Rangers, which was really cool, a really great experience, and they're just so dominant. Their forecheck, the way they play, they get under every player's skin, and their defensive core is just absolutely amazing, and they have been all playoffs. So I think Florida gets it done probably tonight.
And I think one interesting thing to note is that everyone obviously is backing Edmonton. It makes sense. You want to be on Canada's side. You want to root for them, and everyone wants to give them a chance. And look, I'll give them a chance. But at the end of the day, if there's one thing that we've been preaching all season is that Florida is dominant. And if there's one mistake Florida's not going to make, it's going to be to let Edmonton come back down 3-0. Because you're not going to make it this far and not close it out. And look, there's always the possibility that they do that. But the mentality that Florida has adopted, that Paul Maurice has adopted in that locker room is so strong. And I just don't see a way where they blow a 3-0 lead with how they've been playing, since the end of April, pretty much when the playoffs started, or beginning of May. So anyway, we'll see what happens. It's obviously been interesting. It's obviously been fun. It's nice to see a Canadian team in the Cup final, nonetheless. But I do have a question for you regarding the Edmonton Oilers. Let's push, the talk about who they're playing aside. Let's forget about the Florida Panthers. I had this conversation with a buddy. Now I'm going to throw it on to my other buddy. If you replace the Edmonton Oilers decor, so take out Nurse, take out Evan Bouchard, Matthias Ekholm, Kulak, Ceci, everyone, Vincent Desharnais, everyone, and you replace that decor with the Montreal Canadiens decor that they had this year. So Matheson, Gouli, Harris, Struble, and others. I'm just naming a few here. David Savard, whatever. Did the Edmonton Oilers make this series more competitive, or do they even have a better chance at winning the Cup final?
I think that's a tough question because I think the Habs, although they're young, their bottom 4D are much better than the Oilers' bottom 4D. If we're looking at the Oilers' core there, Nurse, don't even get me started on Nurse, Ceci, Kulak, and then it's Desharnais or Broberg. I really don't think they're much better, and probably not better than a decor of Gouli, Harris, Struble, Xhekaj, and Savard, I guess you can say as well there. So maybe Bouchard and Ekholm are more defensively and offensively gifted than Matheson and whoever you want to throw on the right there. But I think it would be almost equivalent, if not better. And I don't want to catch any heat here because we're Habs fans and maybe there's some bias involved. But if we're really looking at it, what do the Oilers have there that Montreal couldn't replicate with guys like McDavid, Draisaitl, Hyman, Nuge, and all the others? So I think that's a good conversation to have, and the Habs could easily be there. Maybe if they had a little more experience.
I guess my take on it is similar to yours, except for the fact that I think that if you replace Edmonton's decor with Montreal's, and you replace Edmonton's goalie with Montreal's, and look, maybe that catches heat too. Stuart Skinner for the playoffs as a whole has been solid. He's had his games, but he's also had some down games. But give me Montembeault over Skinner to get hot and to be good for a longer period of time. Anyway, my point is that if you give me the Montreal Canadiens decor and the goalie tandem in Montreal with Edmonton's 12 forwards, I think that they have a better shot at winning. I know, again, you might think that there's bias involved, but I don't think it's that crazy of a take.
I don't think it's that crazy either. I wouldn't even say Skinner's been solid. He's had his 3
good games,
maybe at best, and I think Montembeault can easily put up those numbers. And obviously, it's not a science. You just need a goalie to get hot, and I think the perfect example of that is Adin Hill last year. He was a third goalie 3 years ago on the San Jose Sharks. So I really don't think that's a hot take. I think Montembeault is a great goalie, and Skinner got put in a lucky situation. He's on a very good team, and his numbers don't even replicate that. So I think that's a good take and a great conversation to have.
Interesting. One of a big what if that we'll never see happen. But on that topic, the Montreal Canadiens decor, just to shine some light on the Canadiens, because realistically, I don't think we're going to be talking about them pretty much at all this episode unless we get into some more specific free agents or trade partners or trade acquisitions that we want them to make. But we're now a year removed from the David Reinbacher pick, or just about a year.
Pretty much, yeah.
And obviously, you and I had very, very similar, opinions about the way that the Canadiens went about making that pick. They passed on Michkov. They passed on Ryan Leonard. They went and took David Reinbacher, the right shot D-man playing in the Swiss League. Didn't have a great year this year. We know that. But, his team was horrible. And his coach, I think they had 3 coaching fires throughout this year. But before we get into our mock draft and before we get into draft talk, what are your thoughts going into next season with this decor? We're going to probably see a lot of David Reinbacher at some point. We're going to see a lot of Lane Hudson. We still got Struble, Jack-Eye, Jordan Harris,
Gooley.
Matheson, Savard, Gooley, and Mayu, who played a few games there at the end of the season.
That's true as well.
So what are your thoughts on this? Don't even tell me what you think about who's going to be in the lineup, but are you confident in this decor to potentially have some sort of competitive success in the 2024-25 season?
I think an off season of growth is going to be huge for all these guys. I think they're still very, very young, and typically that doesn't bode well in a very competitive division. But I think with Reinbacher coming in, with Lane Hudson coming in, with Mayu, and with an aging, or not aging, but a more developed Gooley, Struble, Jack-Eye, and if Harris is still here, I know he's one of the bigger free trade targets in the NHL. I think this decor could potentially be one of the better ones in the NHL. Maybe not next year, but in definitely a couple seasons. We've got so much depth, and with Savard and Matheson, you can't underestimate that vet presence. And I think those are the exact guys that any contender team wants to play for them, because they're putting all their bodies on the line. Savard is a great example of that. So I really do like them. I want to ask you a question. It does relate to the decor, but a little bit caters towards the draft. Let's say you could have seen, the projected order of this upcoming draft last season. And you also would have known we had the 5th overall pick this season as well. Do you think drafting a forward last year would have been a better choice to make, seeing that there's so many good defensemen in this 2 to 9 range, let's say?
I snap call that. I say 100%. There's two main reasons for that, and I'll highlight them right now. If we knew what we know about a player like Ryan Leonard and his year at BC, I think that's an easy pick, in my opinion, at 5 last year instead of David Reinbacher. Now, a lot of people will make the case that Reinbacher fits what we need as that right shot, future number 2 guy in this system on a hopefully a championship team, or at least a very, very competitive Montreal Canadiens team. You can make that case 100 times out of 100, but it doesn't change the fact that Ryan Leonard could be a game changer and might have been the better pick at 5. So that's my first thing. I think I would have gone forward last year, and more specifically Ryan Leonard, instead of Michkov, which we talked about at length last year this time. And my second thing is that I think this year there's a lot of defensive depth, but there's also a lot of right shot defensive depth. Whether that's Lev Shunov, whether that's Carter Yakimchuk, whether that's Zane Parekh. There's a lot. And they all have a lot of offensive upside and could be, more offensively gifted than a guy like Reinbacher, who's not necessarily known for his offensive production. Now, do we necessarily need an offensive guy when you've got guys like Mayu and Hudson and Matheson, who defensively might not be as gifted as you would like them to be? Okay, maybe not necessarily, but in an ideal world, I would take Ryan Leonard and, either Dickinson or Lev Shunov. I guess Lev Shunov's not in the conversation at 5, but Dickinson, Yakimchuk, or Parekh over a potential Lindstrom, or, if we're crossing our fingers, Demidov and Reinbacher. I feel like that's a fair take.
Yeah, and there's even other top forwards there, like Benson, who played the whole season with Buffalo, and he's very skilled, very outstanding player. So I'm on the same page as you. We don't want to bash on Reinbacher, because we are both fans of David Reinbacher, and we do think he has a lot of potential. But if we knew what we know right now, our minds are probably changed, and we're making different choices based on there's just so many defensemen in this draft. It's actually insane. And I wouldn't say the Habs are in a bad position at all this draft, because they will most likely get one of these top 3 forwards in the draft, and they'll have the opportunity, I'll say, because you never know with the Canadiens. But if Chicago decides to go forward, it could change a lot, and the Habs might get stuck with biting on a player who's not highly ranked because they want to pick a forward. So I think last year it could have been the smarter decision to pick that forward, since there were just so many in that draft. And I'm going to agree with you on that point you made.
And I didn't even mention players like Salayev or even Ziv Buyum, who's been known or who has been talked up as one of the smartest defensemen in the draft. And he'll probably be selected around 6 or 7. And we'll get into our mock. But point being is, like you mentioned, I feel like this is a very mainstream take. It's nothing out of the ordinary. I think that there's a very small minority of people that would argue that taking Ryan Backer and a forward this year is better than taking a forward last year and a D this year. But nonetheless, it doesn't change the fact that from a ceiling perspective, from where you want to go with this team and maximizing the potential out of your 2/5 overall picks from last year and this year, it's probably better to go, or it was probably better to go forward last year and D this year. But hey, you live and you learn, right?
Yeah, and just to add on to that, Silayev he's a left shot defenseman, but he plays on the right side. So there's another guy right there. So again, it's hard to predict the future, right? And Cole Yzerman was a guy who was ranked second a year and a half ago, and now all of a sudden he's not even cracking the top 15 in most drafts. So you never know, but again, I'm going to agree with you there and say I'd rather a forward and one of Dickinson, Perek, or Bouillon even, and rather than have Reinbacher and one of the forwards this year.
Yeah, we'll leave it at that. Definitely an interesting discussion. We'll get into this would technically be our third mock draft. We posted the other 2 on our socials. We talked about them briefly in the last episode, I think. Didn't really actually, have do a mock on live or on in the episode, but we'll do one now. We're going to run through our top 10 on each side. We'll probably bounce 1-1-1-1, kind of like a snake draft so that we don't necessarily copy one another. And we'll see where we're at. We'll talk briefly about the prospects. We know a little bit about each guy. So, and it's also about team need, which is also important. So,
yep.
If you want to start us off, Liam.
Yep. San Jose, number 1. Everybody knows this. I feel like it's just known at this point. Macklin Celibrini, they get their franchise guy. Probably not a 100-point player, but his comparable is Jonathan Toews. So you got to assume he's probably a 75, 80-point guy, but is going to be super reliable defensively and play those big minutes for San Jose. Exactly what they needed to add on to those skilled forwards that they have already with Eklund and Will Smith and Bordelot even.
There you go. So San Jose takes Macklin Celibrini, pretty much set in stone at this point. So, it's nice to see a consensus. It tells you all you need to know about that player. Had a very, very, I'll call it underrated season in college, considering that there was so much hype around Bedard last year that I feel like he's not getting nearly as much hype as he did. But Celebrini is a special player and was a true freshman last year and absolutely tore it up in college. So number 1, the San Jose Sharks, Macklin Celebrini. At number 2, in my mock 2.0, I had the Chicago Blackhawks taking Ivan Demidov, but from what I read on Twitter, on the internet, again, this is all speculative, but I'm going with Artem Levshunov, the right shot defenseman out of Michigan State at 2nd overall. Great skater, heads up player. People are saying that he could be a generational defenseman if we weren't talking about a guy like Celebrini in this draft, and probably would be in conversation for number 1 in a lot of other drafts. So I think it's a no-brainer for a Hawks team that, maybe not a no-brainer, because Demidov can also, from a talent perspective, could be that guy. But Levshunov is a building block, and there's no better way to start a team than with your right shot young defenseman. So I'm going Levshunov at 2.
I'm going to keep my pick the same there. Levshunov had it last mock draft as well, and I think just adding a little point onto that, it's harder to get a top defenseman in the league than a skilled forward. So picking Levshunov over Demidov seems like the right choice in terms of Chicago's needs, because they have Korchinski, and that's pretty much it. And he's nothing compared to Levshunov's ceiling. So I think Chicago will have another chance of getting another top forward in next year's draft or even the year after. And I think you can't pass up on adding a top D-man like Levshunov. My third pick, going to the Ducks, I think this is pretty much locked in that they're going to be picking a defenseman, because it just wouldn't make sense. They just moved Drysdale for Cutter Gauthier, and they've got so many great young pieces on forward. They're lacking. They have a pretty deep prospect decor, but I think adding a guy like Anton Silayev will be their choice. 6'7" compared to Victor Hedman. Probably not the best comparison in terms of offensive production, but he was voted by elite prospects as the best shutdown D-man. So Anaheim adds a guy like him that just bolsters their D-corps for the future, and I think they're going to be a lot better this season considering they had so many injuries. So maybe he joins the team, maybe he doesn't, but he'll be a big add for the Ducks.
And I just wanted to ask you a question. Let's take a pause in the mock draft for a second. There was speculation that the Canadian, or it wasn't speculation. It was a confirmed report that the Canadiens had reached out to Anaheim with regards to Trevor Zegras, something we actually talked about on the pod. It's clipped on our socials. We like Trevor Zegras for the right price. Apparently Anaheim's return, and this is again alleged, that they wanted either Guhle or Reinbacher in return. Now, in my opinion, Reinbacher is a hefty price, and so is Guhle, but Guhle's maybe a little bit more fair. Are you pulling the plug on a, let's just call it right now, a 1-for-1 swap Guhle for Zegras in the Canadiens, Anaheim swap there?
That's a tough question to answer, but I'm going to say yes. I feel like Zegras gets a lot of hate because he's a skilled guy and he's flashy and had a tough season this year. But you can't forget this guy had 62 points in his rookie year and then 65 the next. So he's got a lot left here, and maybe he's not viewed as a playoff type player, but I think he can be a big add to the Canadiens, considering too he's very good friends with Cole Caulfield, and it seems like him and Marty St. Louis have a bit of a relationship. So the Canadiens got a lot of good D-men, and I think a few of them are expendable. Maybe Guhle is more non-expendable because he's a big piece, and I love everything what he stands for and how he plays the game. But I think I would do Guhle for Trevor Zegras.
And with that being said, let's say that move were to be made. Again, this is a lot of what ifs, but let's say the Canadiens were to make that move. Anaheim sends Zegras over to the Canadiens send Guhle over to Anaheim. Does that change their draft strategy at number 5? I just want a yes or no answer and
yes.
a quick response.
Yes, they're drafting a D-man.
Okay, so we'll leave it at that. I'm just going to take a minute here to shout out our sponsors at DraftKings.
The chase for the Stanley Cup continues, and the action at DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is just as hot as it is on the ice. With same-game parlays, live betting, odds boosts, and so much more, don't miss out as the Stanley Cup playoffs wind down. We're just about a week and a bit from crowning a Stanley Cup champion between the Florida Panthers and the Edmonton Oilers, and it's your chance now to be able to bet on these games and choose some of your favorite props and lines from these two teams. And if you are new to DraftKings, you got to check this out. New customers bet $5 to get $150 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use code THPN. That's code THPN for new customers to get $150 in bonus bets when you just bet $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. Or in West Virginia, visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Blue Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, 21 plus age varies by jurisdiction. Void in Ontario. Bonus bets expire 168 hours after issuance. See dkng.co/ice for eligibility and deposit restriction terms and responsible gaming resources. Copyright NHL 2024. All rights reserved.
All right, so we can both agree that Zegras to Montreal is in the cards, and I think that's I think that might be the route that Kent Hughes wants to go this summer, whether it's Hughes, Laine, Natchez, Ehlers, young forwards that slot into this timeline perfectly. And maybe that changes their draft strategy, but we're just going to, operate under the assumption that the Canadiens are picking at 5 with the pieces they have in place currently.
Yeah.
But with that being said, we are at our third overall pick, excuse me. You went with Artem Lushunov. You went with Anton Stalayev. And I'm sorry, but I'm mimicking you with that pick with Anton Stalayev at 3. Originally in my mock 2.0, I had Lev Shunov, but that was when Demidov was going 2. I think Stalayev, and I had Stalayev at 8, but I think he makes a jump for this. One of the biggest reasons is that I think that he fits exactly what Anaheim's trying to build towards in terms of that lockdown defenseman, a guy who can play kind of either side, very versatile. His skating for his size is incredible, above average for sure. So that speaks volume. And I think that's the way that Anaheim is going to go. So I'm going with Salayev at 3.
Just to jump in quickly, they also got pretty much their power play one defenseman of the future already with Zellweger, and Minchikov is great as well. So I think that's it fits their decor. They need that shutdown guy, and he's perfect for this.
No, absolutely. Very, very. They're going to be a great team. I think that Cutter Gauthier trade made a lot of sense. Obviously, they had a lot of leverage in that deal because Cutter Gauthier was not going to play for Philly, but one of the more talented forwards, or maybe the most talented forward in the NCAA last year. So at 4, this is where things get spicy because I think that this pick really, and again, every pick in the top 5 is going to matter for the Canadiens, obviously, but I think that this is going to be the deciding pick for the Canadiens. And I think new head coach, new GM, I don't know if that changes a whole lot, but I think that they're just going to pull the plug. I think they're going to pull the trigger on Demidov. I know that might be kind of, I wouldn't say controversial, but maybe a lot of people don't have Columbus taking Demidov and more going the Lindstrom route. But I think that they're going to push all the speculation aside about Demidov and, the fact that he's playing in Russia currently and he played in the Russian junior leagues last year. I think that they're just going to go with the most talented player off the board and settle at that. They have a lot of young Russian players. They have Adam Fantilli. They have a great decor, so they're not going D in my opinion. I mean, they have a lot of great young defensemen in their pipeline. So I think that they're going forward, and I think that they're going strictly skill here with Ivan Demidov at 4.
Yeah, they got a lot of good forwards with Ken Johnson, Fantilli, Chinikov, and I think it would be a great ad for them. I still think they're lacking down the middle, which is why I think they're going to go with Caden Lindstrom here. 6'4", I believe. And he just seems like a perfect fit for them. It sounds like Jenner is almost on his way out here. And Kent Johnson, I don't know if he's going to be playing center. So you got Fantilli, and then you got a lot of wingers. And I think Lindstrom will slot in perfectly for them. Very skilled, great two-way player. He could play the wing as well. It's not really decided yet. A lot of these guys could be marked as a center but end up playing the wing. So he could be a winger, but I'm going to say he plays center, and Columbus goes with Caden Lindstrom. Number 5, this is the Montreal Canadiens pick. We're going to flip-flop, I assume, but I got Ivan Demidov. Not much to add on there. He was voted as having the highest ceiling in this draft, higher than Macklin Celibrini, and he is voted as the best offensive player in this draft as well. Player comparable, Mitch Marner. Obviously, Mitch Marner has his playoff problems, which we're not going to get into, but a 95-point player is something that's very difficult to pass on. Again, people like to compare this situation to Michkov, but it's completely different. Demidov isn't signed to a 3-year KHL contract. I'm pretty sure he has 1 year left, if I am sure, but they were talking about a release for him. So he could easily come over, and the Habs used to have a lot of Russians. So I don't see why they can't open that door up again. So Montreal gets their skilled forward, and I think it will be a great time in Montreal if the Habs select Demidov. So I'd be very happy with that pick.
And at 5, I'm going with Caden Lindstrom to Montreal, which I'd also be very, very happy with. Lindstrom or Demidov are at the top of my list in terms of wants. And look, I think at the end of the day, from what I heard, at least on the Athletic Hockey Show from Arpin Basu, Caden Lindstrom is at the top of the Montreal Canadiens board again, speculation, but is, I think, at the top of the Montreal Canadiens board in terms of the player that they want to take. I think that speaks volume because the Canadiens don't mess around when they really like a guy. And in this case, again, obviously it's gonna be a domino effect. But if Demidov goes anywhere in that top 4, I know for a fact, or I guess I don't know for a fact, but I have a gut feeling that the Canadiens are going to be very, very aggressive on pursuing Lindstrom and snap calling that. So in this case, if Demidov were to go anywhere in that top 4, and in my specific mock to number 4 to Columbus, I would have the Canadiens taking Caden Lindstrom at 5. And kind of, piggybacking off of everything that Liam said in terms of what Lindstrom can do. And at number 6, to the Utah Hockey Club. Here I'm still looking at Arizona, but to the Utah Hockey Club.
good call.
I'm going with Zeev Buium. Now, might be, I don't even know if that's considered bold at this point because I feel like he's jumped up boards because of, his ability, or his hockey sense and what he can do on D. And he was playing at Denver, if I'm not mistaken, this past NCAA season. Highly touted prospect. I like him a lot. I think he's one of the better D in the draft, one of the most well-rounded defensemen in the draft. And as a result, I think Utah goes with that quote unquote safe pick and selects Zeev Buium at number 6.
He was also a champion at Denver. So
there you go.
As well, he was voted as the best transition D-man in this draft. So from 6 to 12, it's so hard to predict. There's so many great players, but I'm gonna go with the pure offensive defenseman Zane Parekh to the Arizona Coyotes, Utah Hockey Club. And I think Arizona is definitely in need of a pure offensive D-man, considering they picked Simashev last year, they have Lamoureux, and they also picked Daniel Boot last year. Was Geeky picked last year as well? Did they? Or was he the year before?
Geeky might have been. It was 2 years ago.
Okay, so considering all those picks, I think an offensive defenseman makes sense here. And I'm going to go Zane Parekh. He'll be a PP1 defenseman for them for a long, long time. I don't think what they have right now will stick with Sean Durzi. So Zane Parekh gets that slot. At number 7, the Ottawa Senators. I'm keeping it really similar to my last one, but they're going to go with Sam Dickinson, maybe one of the better defensemen in this draft. That slips a little here. Champion with the London Knights in the OHL. Overall, a terrific two-way defenseman, has great offensive upside. Ottawa's definitely in need of a D-man, considering sounds like Chychrun is on his way out. And they need some shakeups, so I think Sam Dickinson comes in and plays a big role in this team.
I like it. I like it a lot. To the point where I almost mimic your pick. And again, this is just all our opinions and kind of what we hear. But I'm going to go a little bit off the board here. I think you can make the claim that Ottawa is in desperate need of defensemen, kind of like you mentioned. And as a result, I'm going to have them taking a defenseman, but it's not going to be Dickinson and it's not going to be Parekh. It's going to be Carter Yakimchuk. And he's a right shot D, played in WHL last year for the Calgary Hitmen, if I'm not mistaken. And from what I hear / see, he is another great offensive guy, 30-goal scorer in the WHL, has a very, very elevated skill set. And I think that he might, kind of like Buium, maybe not as much upside as a guy like Parekh, but definitely has a very, very solid floor, amazing hands, good skater, and vision, from what I see at least. And as a result, I think that the Sens play the conservative game and go with Carter Yakimchuk at 7. And then at 8 to the Seattle Kraken, I'm going with, I'm gonna let things take their course here. Sam Dickinson, 8 to the Seattle Kraken. I feel like at that point, based on my mock, letting him drop that far is almost too aggressive. And Seattle's gonna go for potentially or debatably the best player available there and take Sam Dickinson at 8.
I like that. I'm gonna go back to one of the picks you made before. Seattle at number 8 takes Zeev Buium. Not much more to comment about that. I think Seattle adds a defenseman no matter what. They got a lot of good forwards already. And I think they're definitely in need of a D-man. So Zeev Buium, they get to pick him up. At number 9, I feel like it's just written in stone at this point. If he's available, Calgary's got to make the pick, and it's got to be Tidge Iginla. Very skilled forward. I don't think he's a nepo baby. I don't think there's any nepotism involved here. He's super skilled. He has the name Iginla, and he's got those genes. Jerome, his father, was a huge part of the Flames, and I think they got to do right by him and pick his son. I think that's exactly what they need, considering they moved Kuzmenko, Lindholm, Hanifin, and it sounds like Markstrom's out. They're going into this retool phase, and Iginla would be a great player to have on that first line in a few years.
I was going to go the same path as you with Tidge. I keep hearing people, his name is Tidge apparently. Tidge. It kind of throws me off a little bit because I Tidge sounds better, I guess. But anyway, at 9, I have Tidge Aginla as well. I think that there's a lot of what's the word I'm looking for? There's potential that I think Aginla can go as high as 5 to the Canadiens. But I also think that there's the potential that he can drop to like 12.
For sure.
Now that might be a little bit aggressive. I think 12 might be a little bit aggressive. But there's such a large range of outcomes with Tidge Aginla. But I think if he's available at that point, like Calgary's in that position where they're going to go for, we'll say best player of it. Like they're in a full rebuild at this point, right?
Yeah.
Like Markstrom's going to be on the way out this offseason. We can probably assume they don't really have many building blocks, and they've made a few trades getting rid of Lindholm. Like they're really going for a full rebuild there. And I think as a result, they're going to go with, in their eyes, maybe the best player available. And, naturally the ties, like you said, written in the stars, Tidge Aginla, number 9 to the Calgary Flames. And with the 10th overall pick to the New Jersey Devils, although I've left Parekh off my board, although there's guys like Konsta Helenius and Branson Nygaard and whatever, I really, really think that the New Jersey Devils, and again, when their decor is healthy, it's pretty strong, right? Underratedly strong. I really like the idea of the New Jersey Devils going out and picking up Berkeley Catton. Skilled forward, might be one of the more skilled guys in the draft, but doesn't get that recognition, I think.
Yep.
Kind of like how Zach Benson was underrated last year. Like to me, like he's not small, but I think he measures in at about 5. I think he was
5'11".
Right. So like considered to be somewhat undersized for the professional game. But nonetheless, like you can't teach skill, you can't teach goal scoring. And I think Catton does that at one of the highest levels. And as a result, slipping to 10 might actually be, a slam dunk for New Jersey selecting Berkeley Catton.
For sure. Apparently he put on a lot of weight in order to play center in the league. He's like 190 pounds. And I heard his player comparable is Seb Aho. So super offensively skilled guy. I don't think I've seen a guy put up like 130 points or whatever he put up and slip this low in a draft. But it's a very strong draft. Maybe not the most top heavy, but there's a lot of great players who are able to crack this top 10. And I think Berkeley's right there. But I'm going to go with Konsta Helenius. I feel like New Jersey's a hard team to evaluate. If I put my money somewhere, I'd say they trade the pick. And I don't want to get into it too much, but I feel like they just have those forward pieces in the right position, and they have a lot of great D-men in terms of Dougie, who's on a long-term deal, Hughes, Nemitz, and they got great pieces with Siegenthaler and Marino. So it's hard to evaluate what their real need is. And considering they have Hughes and Heischer down the middle, maybe it's odd that they go out and add a center with Catton or Helenius. But I feel like at that pick, it just makes sense to pick one of those guys. So I'm going with Konsta Helenius. I'm not going to say I know that much about him, but I do know he's a good two-way player, has offensive upside. And look, I feel like that's the right pick for New Jersey in this place.
I like it. So if there's any notable guys that you wanted to mention that you left out of your top 10, I was just going to list off. For me, it was Zane Parekh. And I mean, I guess at this point, like if you want to say, like I left out Helenius. I probably jumped on Yakimchuk for sure. And I also did leave out Cole Yzerman, obviously. Now, that's one of the bigger question marks that I think we'll get into in the second half of this episode, and kind of your thoughts on some of these deeper sleeper guys or maybe mid-round, first-round guys. Because again, keep in mind the Canadiens do have a second first-round pick, which could be of value through trade or to move up in some respect. So we'll keep it like that. Are there any notables that you left out of your mock?
Yeah, I left out Yakimchuk. I left out obviously Yzerman, like we talked about, and Catton, and then another guy, Beckett Seneca. Beckett Seneca. So again, a lot of talk about him. He dropped a little bit, but I feel like that top 12, 13 guys are guaranteed to go in that top 10, and then it's like the floodgates open. Anything can happen with guys like Liam Greentree, Branson Nygaard.
Right. But I find it funny you say that, because as much as we think that, I also have the weird feeling that like to me, I agree with you. It looks it looks like straightforward.
Yeah, for
But
sure.
then it's like, oh, all of a sudden, some random ranked 25th overall guy is jumping to 11, and now it switches everything because now everyone's just going for best player available. Like Daniil Budd a little bit. Like, what was that, last year or 2 years ago?
It was last year. Yeah.
Like, people were questioning that pick. And
Easton Cowan.
Right. Like, you never know, right? And like teams like to take chances. So anyway.
I feel like all these D-men can be scrambled up. And other than Lev Shunov, I think from the second best D-man to the 8th or 9th best D-man, anything could happen. And the same goes for some of those forwards there. So I don't know. Even last year, we all thought there was going to be a specific order, but then Michkov changes it. Benson drops to whatever it was, like 15, 14, whatever it was. And Reinbacher jumps up too. So anything could happen at this draft. Maybe it looks like that it's set in stone. We have a lot of the same picks, but we definitely expect there to be a lot of change because we're not in the minds of these GMs and we don't know as much as them, but anything can happen. That's the fun of the draft.
There you go. So we're going to leave it at that for this part of the episode. We're going to try and start doing a part 1 and 2 for the week. So maybe pump out 2 30-minute episodes every single week for the rest of the summer. I'm crossing my fingers that we could do it. But anyway, guys, we appreciate you guys for tuning in, of course, as always. And we'll see you in part 2.